Hello everyone and welcome to Talking Geeky Stuff with me, Tenshi. So we'll be talking about Sega Dreamcast, another classic console that I adored. And I had two versions of it, which I'll go into a bit more detail later on. And maybe talk a bit about why it kind of failed, the reasons behind it, well, my personal reasons, and so on. So some of you probably noticed the console here, it's got a blue swivel instead of the orange/red. Because in the UK and Europe and Australia, it was blue. It was blue. And then in Japan and North America, it was the red or orange. So anyway, the Sega Dreamcast. I personally thought it was a fantastic console. It came out a year before GameCube, PlayStation, Xbox. It had a year head start. And yeah, considering Sega came off a few disastrous points, the Sega Saturn didn't do so well. It lasted for 3-4 years? I can't remember. I liked the Saturn. It was my 2D beat 'em up choice console. And that's one of the reasons why I bought the Dreamcast, because the beat 'em up stuff. I was more into 2Ds that time, but slowly 3D was coming in. The first game I got for the Dreamcast was Soul Calibur. That was fantastic. One-to-one combat, smooth graphics, playing it with my brother all the time. That, and then of course Virtua Fighter. Big fan of Virtua Fighter. Back then I was more of a Virtua Fighter fan than, say, Tekken. I still think Sega should definitely do more Virtua Fighters. Still waiting for Virtua Fighter 6 or 7. I can't remember what number it is now. Man, I'm losing my memory. Yes, and of course you had Sega, Sonic Adventure 1 and 2, which were great games. But to be honest with you, I played it recently and I downloaded it was on sale on Steam. Purchased 1 and 2 and a few other Sonic games. And the adventure games haven't really aged that well, to be honest. Unlike the 3D Mario games, for example. I think that Sonic just works better in 2D. It's just the pacing of the game. It's almost impossible to keep on with the speed of Sonic. And of course, Sonic kind of dipped it a little bit as well, because he kind of missed the whole generation. There wasn't really a mainstream game on the Sega Saturn. But then you had Shenmue 1 and 2, which was great games. They wasn't wicked. They wasn't the best. They were good. Don't get me wrong. I give them an 8 out of 10. Even back then, I gave it 8 out of 10. It's just certain things that kind of bored me a bit. And also, the first one cost something like $14 million to make. Remember, that's 20 plus years ago, right? That would have been a decent sized Hollywood movie back then. So that didn't really help Sega either financially. There is one game though Sega's sitting on, and not just me, but I know many people are kind of hoping, wishing that Sega remakes it. Is Skies of Arcadia. That, in my mind, is probably the best RPG on the Dreamcast. Then, of course, it's probably Grandia 2 was a second favorite. But you're thinking, come on, Sega, Skies of Arcadia needs a remake or something, anything. I completed it twice on the Dreamcast and then completed it again on GameCube. You had like Crazy Taxi 1 and 2 was great classics. Of course, I played in the arcades then. Then you got Jet Grind Radio, or in the UK was called Jet Set Radio. Jet Set Radio was pretty cool games, funky, great soundtrack, great cel shading graphics. Considering after that game, every other game came out that had cel shading. Kind of got to the point where everybody was sick and tired of cel shading at the time, and they all kind of copied Jet Set Radio. But what is the reason that it didn't sell that well? The overall sales of it was something around 10.5 million units worldwide, 10.6, 10.7, somewhere around there. There's a few things I just felt that Sega had trouble issues, coming from Sega Saturn, you just couldn't compete in the 3D world with Sony. Then even before that, you had the flops like the 32X, and then before that, the Mega CD, they didn't do so well, and it cost Sega a lot of money. And of course, the fact that Sega Saturn didn't sell so well, I mean, Sonic didn't really have a proper kind of, I mean, they had Sonic CD or something like that. It wasn't that good. They didn't have, it just didn't sell. So he kind of, and then of course, he had all these kind of new gamers coming in, and their first console was Sony that time. And Sony offered something new, revolutionary in a certain way. It was 3D. 3D that time was massive. I mean, you had games like these racing games, they were fantastic. You had Tekkens, all these 3D beat 'em up games and 3D games coming out. I mean, you look at them nowadays, they are terrible, but back then they were revolutionary. So, and then of course you had Sega Dreamcast was advertising like online games, but the problem was it didn't have an online game for a year or two afterwards. Choo Choo Rocket. It was the bad thing. Sega was ahead of its time because my Dreamcast had a 33K connection, so even if you had games for online, the online infrastructure wasn't that good then. So I just felt that was a bit ahead of its time. And then I personally felt the controllers were okay, but they wasn't that good. I tried playing a few first-person shoot 'em up, they just didn't work so well. Even for beat 'em ups, I just felt that the shape of the controller wasn't that good. I had to buy a couple of controllers that looked a bit like the Sega Saturn one, because I ended up playing a lot of 2D beat 'em ups on the Dreamcast. And then come to games, it didn't have that one or two. For example, it didn't have like a Mario type game. Yeah, they got Sonic, but remember, Sonic was not as big as it is during the Mega Drive games. I remember Mario did a great transition from 2D to 3D. I mean, Mario 64 at that time was getting 9.6, 9.5, 9.7, considered for many years the greatest 3D beat 'em up of all time. The granddaddy of them all, right? Then Shenmue, great game, but it was quite niche. They didn't really have a good action adventure game like Ocarina of Time that time. And then of course you didn't have a mainstream game either, I think. So that was, some of it was missing there. Then you got competition like the GameCube, the PlayStation 2 and Xbox. All great consoles. And all the companies I mentioned had more money than Sega. Yeah, you can say that Nintendo had a hard time with N64, but they still made a lot of money from the IPs and the handheld division, right? Sony, they had more money than they did, and of course PS2 came from a successful PS1, right? Remember, PS1 sold over 100 million. Then you got an added factor that PS2 was also a DVD at that time. So people bought it for a console and also a DVD player. There you go, 2 in 1, right? Then you got Microsoft, who they openly admitted that they were going to lose money, but they can afford that. Microsoft, the richest company in the world, they can afford to dish out a console here and there, and they just literally pay for the market percentage, So I think that Sega just, I don't know, I just felt quite bad for them because I really wanted Sega to do good, especially after Saturn. But hey ho, it's still a classic system, and I ended up getting 2 of them. When I was in Japan in the early 2000s, I got myself a second-hand Sega Saturn, and I purchased a whole bunch of 2D beat 'em up games. And of course, the only thing I had to do was just get an adapter back in this country. So let me know what you think about the Saturn. Did you like it? Did you hate it? What do you think the reasons that Sega Sega Dreamcast was a failure? Well, that is some of the things I mentioned. Probably there's a whole bunch more, but Sega Saturn and the Dreamcast, both classic consoles. I may do a Sega Saturn video soon, but I was a bit more kind of devastated with the Dreamcast lost, to be honest, because I felt that, unlike the Saturn, you kind of knew about a year or two in, you knew that it just wasn't up to the PlayStation standard at that time. But the Dreamcast, he had all the bells and whistles, but it's just a shame. It's just a shame. So to me, it was a greater loss than a Saturn. Anyway, let me know what you think, and please just give this video a like and consider subscribing if you'd like me to hear me talk more about geeky stuff. And thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are in the world. And please stay safe. Goodbye.